thing of joy, which is a capital beauty forever. Hello, welcome to Sci Fi book reviews. As usual, I'm Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of Kuldesak by Richard Cowper. This is a book from 1972. It is from Quartet, and it's a classic science fiction. So if you have not come across my classic science fiction book reviews before, basically I give you a spoiler-free review, a little tiny one, then I give you a full spoiler-filled synopsis based on my faulty memory, and then I go through my classic sci-fi bingo, which is jumping off points to talk about stuff in the book that I might not have discussed in the synopsis. And yeah, I love these old books. They're not these reviews are not meant to be like they're stupid. I think they have a lot of value. I just think sometimes there's problematic stuff that actually is quite funny most of the time. So jumping into this, slow to start but with a great finish. Kuldesak is very weird in a good way. What's it about? Earth, 2,000 years after the final Holocaust which drove man deep underground, a ghostly deserted landscape peopled only by the diligent robots who, century after century, soundly harvest grain which no man will eat. Up into this eerie world comes Mel, a questioning young roamer who has disobeyed the law which says he must never venture into or beyond the lost levels. Together with 3 companions and a companion not of this earth, Mel takes on the awesome task of freeing human beings from the tyranny imposed on them by their remote ancestors, of justifying the agonized cry of Barney as he died in a forbidden level, "I am a man! Everything is for man!" It doesn't make any sense. Also, the robot is hilarious. Okay, so while this will never be my favorite classic sci-fi, I actually really, really enjoyed this one. Or at least I really enjoyed the last third of it. The first third is hard to get through, mainly because we're introduced to a couple of cool characters who disappear after one chapter, and then we're dropped into this world that doesn't get a lot of explanation. It makes sense to me now that I've read the whole thing, but this is a rare time when an info dump would have actually been kind of beneficial. This book is like, here's this world, we're not going to explain anything. And it doesn't explain anything in any kind of capacity. So you're like, wait, what is a plant? What are nubs? What is a roamer? Like, you don't know. The book's like, you should know this. Of course you should know this information. The characters are fine. They aren't super deep, but main one, Mel, is a young man coming of age who is brave and likable, and you do root for him. The other characters are his sister Jo and Frankie, who's his love interest, who actually ends up being way more than just a love interest in a twist that I did not expect and I really appreciated. There's also a really cool alien character later on. The robot on the cover, barely in it. I don't even know why he's on the cover, and in fact I don't think they even look like robots. They look like square boxes. But anyway, the maple leaves, they're actually sycamore and they have value in the plot. But yeah, I don't know what's with this weird rocket thing. Whoever designed this, it was the 70s. I mean, they were on LSD. The writing is sort of middle ground for the time period, a bit dry, but there are some pretty interesting ideas, at least on like a societal level. The book has more depth than I was expecting, and I will give it credit for that. There's a line that's very relevant today. "Forgive my saying so, Mel, but you appear to be making a mistake which I suspect a good many of your ancestors must have made. You are crediting your computer with wisdom, whereas what it possesses is knowledge. Unlike yourselves, its total is still no more than the sum of its parts. In many areas, its knowledge is certainly extensive. Nevertheless, even by our own standards, it is still distinctly limited." Yeah, I know. Oh, I also have to read you this absolutely wild section on page 2 because it's funny. Okay, so it's talking about these aliens who basically look like humans. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, their limbs were perfectly proportioned and they both possessed the full quota of toes and fingers. Nevertheless, a human eye had been able to range over their naked bodies. It would surely have flickered shyly as it reached the area where their thighs joined the abdomen. We're getting spicy here. At the point where in human male there droops the capitals thing of joy, which is a capital beauty forever, these ethereal visitors were as bald and smooth as porcelain. Oh, it goes better. Furthermore, their chests carried no such vestigial nipples as adorn the male human breast. I got to page 2 and I was like, yep, this is the book for me. This is hilarious. I'll give you a bit of an explanation as to why it's called a cul-de-sac, which, as you know, is like a part of road infrastructure. Okay. Kuldesak, repeated the chief mentor with a smile. I do not know whether there is an equivalent in your tongue. It describes a road along which no further progress is possible. We employ it as a generic term for situations such as that in which the giant reptiles who once dominated your planet must surely have found themselves. Had it not been for yourselves, there is little doubt that on our next visit here we would have found ourselves applying it to your species too. So essentially it refers to the fact that humans have plateaued, I guess. I was like, okay. So, I'm going to be jumping into my spoiler review now, where I go through kind of the synopsis of the book in detail. So if you plan on reading Kuldesak, don't stay for this. So, it starts with two aliens surveying Earth in the future that has been taken over by self-perpetuating machines. We kind of get a bit with them, and then they take off. Mel, a young man, receives a telepathic vision from his pet from the outside world. I guess his pet kind of, goes through the tunnels of this underground sort of silo situation they have themselves in, if you've read the book Wool, or if you've watched the show Silo, which is actually really good. So Mel is a roamer, which is like a nomadic population of not vat-grown humans that kind of exist outside of the vat-grown population. So other humans, they call them plants, which are, so they have like microchips embedded in their temples. They call them nubs, and they're controlled basically, or at least can be controlled by the God Hole, which is, I guess, their vision of God, who talks to them via the God screens in their rooms, which are basically TVs. So it's kind of like they're controlled by some omniscient force, and you don't really realize until later in the book that it is an AI controlling everybody. And I think that's why the descriptions are so vague. Like, you're meant to think it's like some kind of theocracy, that it's based on like that it's humans doing it, but it's actually the human's god is the AI. So, okay. It makes sense when you get to the end of the book, but through most of it, you're just like, what? Anyway, so there's like, because it's like a silo situation, there's levels, there's forbidden levels, and then there's like the upper levels they're not allowed to go to. So Mel's rat, due to their telepathy, which is not explained, I guess it's some kind of evolutionary thing that happened, showed him the route it took to get there. Before this, Mel goes to a market and he meets with this young woman, Frankie. She used to be a plant, but she was never able to kind of fuse with it, or she like rejected the nubs. Anyway, they have a sort of date, and then she kind of is like, I'm going off with my friends, I'll see you later. Later, Mel, because he's so curious, he follows the route of his rat and he finds the outside world. He takes a sycamore leaf from the cover and some like maize along with him. And he also meets a robot who tends the fields, and that's the robot, I guess, supposedly from the cover, which is not the one from the cover. Sometime later, he's arrested by the government for going outside, and he's whipped very badly. As he recovers, or like kind of shortly after he recovers, he takes part in this coming of age ritual where he has to have sex with somebody. His friend, the same age, is part of this ritual too, and his sister chooses the friend, thankfully, not her brother. That would be weird. His name is Betos. Mel thinks he's going to have to be paired with this older woman, but then Frankie shows up. And there's sort of a collection process, if you get what I'm saying, of like, stuff. I'm not sure what I can say on YouTube without getting like banned, but they collect some of the stuff multiple times. And then I don't know what they do with it. I'll tell you later. It has bearing on the plot. After the four of them they start living together as like a group. And then Mel, he's kind of politicized by his whipping, and he's thinking back to this, when he witnessed this man for being killed for traversing the forbidden levels. The guy from the back, Barney, who is mentioned in the back, but is mentioned literally in one sentence at the start of this book. He thinks about that. And basically he's kind of like motivated to be like, no, there's something wrong here. I don't like my society. Why aren't we allowed to go outside? All of this stuff. So he decides, he's like, I'm going up again. His friends come with him. They're accosted by all these robots, but Frankie destroys them with some sort of telekinetic and EMP power she has over machines. This was hinted at earlier in the story, and it's why she can't be like a plant. It's because I guess she can control technology. It doesn't really, not really explained why this happens. I think it's supposed to be some kind of an anomaly, because I guess the vat-grown people are kind of like genetically modified. Maybe there was like some kind of a glitch. I don't know. We don't get any explanation. Up top, it's very cute. They're up there like, oh my god, look at all of this, blah, 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 blah. It starts to rain, and they freak out. The four of them just like bolt, because they don't know what it is, right? They're losing it. And then the robot kind of rescues them and rounds them up, sends them to this like compound, I guess, that has existed for the overseers of the robots years and years ago, but they don't use it anymore. So they have nice showers and have some food. And then at the compound, they meet this guy named Arphaxis, who is anthropologist alien from the start of the book, whom they share in educating one another about one another. And so it's kind of like a first contactee situation, which is kind of cool. Then they are attacked by these big machines sent by the theocracy, apparently, which Frankie destroys. And I can't remember properly, is it the aliens that take them? But somehow, I can't remember who takes them there, or maybe they go with, I can't remember how they get there, but they go and they end up meeting this AI, and they realize that the AI is controlling, humanity, and they do a classic, overwhelm the machine with logic trick, and convince it to rescind its iron grip on humanity under the ground, as well as give the roamers back their rights, and to stop using their sperm to create the vat people. So that's what the collection was for. So they allowed this kind of 10% of the population of roamers to exist because they used their genetic material to destagnate kind of their DNA pools, their DNA pools. Yeah, but yeah, the whole thing is very kind of like, it is interesting. It's just, it doesn't really get explained until like the last 2 pages of the book. So you're kind of like, I don't know what this kid is really fighting for most of the story. So throughout this whole situation, Arphaxis and Frankie become tight because they're kind of, Frankie's like very intelligent and very kind of perceptive, and Arphaxis is the same, and they kind of like grow really close, but then Arphaxis has to leave, and that's the end of the book. It's actually kind of sad. There's a line that it took me, I had to read it like 4 or 5 times to figure it out, because the book, so when Arphaxis talks and the words are untranslatable, they use like just little asterisks here and there, and so apparently, so Arphaxis is going to go, and he wants to say goodbye to Joe and Betos, but Mel is like, oh, they're in love, you won't see them, they're busy. And Arphaxis is like, in love, I don't know what that is. And then he's like, I'm going to remember this. And then they stand, Mel and Frankie are kind of on a plateau watching him go back up to his ship. And Frankie and Arphaxis have like a telepathy conversation where basically it's hard to figure it out, but basically she's calling for him, and then she calls a few more times, and Mel's like, come on, let's go. But then Arphaxis says, Frankie, kind of, are we in love? And then with a smile of breathtaking radiance, Frankie turned to Mel. What is it, he asked. Oh, nothing, she said, and in a sense she was right. After all, how can you possibly be unfaithful with someone who is over 200 miles away? So I was like, what? I was like, okay, if they're in love, I get it. Okay, fine. But also like, what do you mean? 200 miles isn't that far. Like, I could drive 200 miles in like, what? I'm thinking of kilometers. But even so, yeah, isn't that light? Isn't miles, because it's what, 6 kilometers is 10 miles? So, anyway, still, you could drive that in like a few hours. Anyway, let's move into my classic sci-fi bingo. So, outdated science, not really. There's actually not a lot of science in this book. Spaceship blows up, nope. Social changes, yes, given society is living underground in a giant silo. They're grown in vats. They're implanted with these diodes. They're controlled by machines. There's a lot of things that are different about society. There's no sexy female scientist. Cool aliens. They're not really cool because they look just like humans. I do love that description of Thing of Joy, but that doesn't really give it a check mark, I don't think. Thing of Joy, I can't get over it. Ancient tech and ruins. Yeah, I'd say the forbidden levels are kind of like ruins, and then there's like a compound that the young people go to, and they're like exploring it and immersing themselves in this technology they never had, like showers that smell nice and stuff like that. So I think that kind of fits that prompt. No generation ships, space soldiers. There is AI and robots, of course. So yep, there's the big AI god thing. There's just the little worker robots in the fields that they run into in the first instance. There's no new worlds, there's no cyberpunk, blatant sexism, no, not really. So Frankie is very assured, and women aren't reduced or treated like props, and the whole, like, men rite of passage thing doesn't apply to the girls, apparently, and Joe was the one who chose Betos, so I think it's actually kind of almost a reversal, and I thought that was really interesting, actually. And yeah, no, they're all, I mean, Joe's a bit whiny, but Frankie definitely is not, and so I think, and the two of them, they contribute to the story, all this stuff. Reptile aliens, no. And so there's no reptile aliens all the way down to the male MC is a dick. It is post-apocalyptic, obviously. Wild weapons, yeah, there's robot dogs and there's the scented showers. The aliens have this sort of predator camouflage and these silver bubbles that they use to transport to their ships in orbit. That was pretty cool. But that was kind of it for inventions and weapons. Racial equality, it's never mentioned. Mind possession, no. No galactic war, no time travel. The Bechdel test, yes. Joe and Frankie spend a lot of time together, but they don't actually have a real exchange one-on-one until the end of the book. But they do have it. It does exist. Alien-human romance, yes. So this part is wild. So near the end of the book, they end up talking about kind of like human reproduction, and given the two pairs are essentially newlyweds and they all like live together, there's not a lot of privacy, they don't have any shame about it, they end up, doing such to show the alien what it's like. And then the alien actually ends up joining in. I was like, okay, wild. And as I said, Arfexis and Frankie, they talk a lot, they actually kind of fall in love a bit. That definitely qualifies as alien human romance in my opinion, and I don't get those very often in these old books, so I was like, oh, how cute. There's no female main character and there's no derelict ship, but still, though, this book is really fun. I really liked it. The more I think about it, I like it more. So thank you for checking out this review of it, and